Okay, we are going to start working on our landscape perspective. Remember, a landscape is a scene, like of the land. So it doesn't have a person or a bowl of fruit or anything like that. It's a picture of land. It could be the ocean, the mountains, the sea, all of those things are considered to be landscapes. So for our paper, we're going to turn it landscape direction, which means it is short and wide. We're gonna put our name and class code on the back. And our tools for right now are our piece of paper, a pencil, and then a ruler. And we're gonna use one of our 18-inch rulers. Okay, the first thing that we're gonna work on is, for our perspective, is what's called the vanishing point. And this is where a lot of lines, as they travel back into the distance on our landscape, they're going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller until they disappear. And you're going to find that if you were to look at a landscape and see a great distance, that a lot of things do go to their vanishing point. It's a way that a lot of artists have figured out to make things look like they're getting smaller as they go into the distance to make them look more realistic. So our ruler, we're going to turn it horizontal, and I'm going to put it so that my straight edge is about in the middle of my paper. I can go farther up if I want to. I'll have less room for my sky up here, or I could have it go a little bit farther down. I'll have a lot of room for my sky, but not as much room for my actual landscape, my perspective that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to try and put mine as close to the center of my piece of paper as I can. And we're just using it as a straight edge right now, so it doesn't have to be lined up on any numbers. And I'm going to take my helping hand, make sure I've got a nice wide grip to hold my ruler, take my pencil, line it up against the top edge of my ruler, and I'm going to draw a line that goes across the width of my paper. This is called the horizon line. The horizon line is where the sky meets the ground, okay? Or the horizon. And it's also going horizontal. Some tricks to help you remember that. The next thing that we're going to put is called the vanishing point, and this is where lines, as they continue to travel back into our landscape and get smaller, are going to go to this vanishing point. We're only using 1 point perspective, so we just need one vanishing point. If we were doing two, we would need 2 points. So for our first one, I'm going to place it about in the center of my piece of paper. It can be a little bit farther to the left or farther to the right, but we don't want to put it at the extreme edges. So we want to put it about in the center. And there's my vanishing point. It's just a dot, okay? So pretty much with a perspective like this, any type of vertical line is going to connect with my vanishing point. Horizontal lines, not so much. Those are going to be the lines that are like directly in front of you. So you're looking right at like the front of a building or something like that, whereas the side, the horizontal lines, or the vertical lines would be traveling back to my vanishing point. Here's what that's going to look like. So for my landscape, I'm going to create a field. You could choose to do a road and maybe have some fields on the side if you wanted to, but I'm going to do a field. And in my field, there's going to be rows for the plants or whatever that are growing. So I'm going to just do several different lines down here in the ground part. This is the sky and my background, and then this would be like my middle ground and foreground. So I'm going to put my lines going to the vanishing point here. Okay, I think actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to do half of fields, and then I'm going to do like a road, and you'll see what I'm doing. Okay, so my vanishing point, any of my vertical lines are going to go to my vanishing point, and I'm just using my ruler as a straight edge, so I'm going to line it up with the dot that I've drawn on my paper, my vanishing point, and I'm just going to draw a line coming all the way down to the bottom of my piece of paper. Okay, there's one line. Now I'm going to draw another one. Depending on what you're doing, if you're doing rows for a field, your lines might be closer together. If you're doing a road itself, it might be farther apart. I'm going to have a field over here, and then I'm going to have a road as well. So I'm going to do both, just so I can show you both. Okay, So I've lined up my ruler with my vanishing point, and there's the other side of my road. You can see how it looks like my road is getting smaller as it goes back to the vanishing point. That is the whole point. Okay, so now I'm gonna do my lines for my field, and these are going to be closer together. And anytime I do this line, I'm always making sure that it's touching or connecting to my vanishing point so that it looks like the rows of my field are getting smaller as they go back. Vanishing points and perspective like this is something that was actually created and started during Renaissance art, which both is interesting and also surprising at the same time. I would have thought that they would have figured out perspective before that, but I also know that the Renaissance time period for art was also, there was a lot going on. A lot of things were being figured out. So I think they actually used perspective before the Renaissance, but they just didn't know they were using perspective. So, okay. So now I have my rows for my field. I have my road here. So this is what's called the foreground of our picture. This is the part that's in the front, okay? The second part of our landscape is going to be what's called the middle ground. Middle ground is something that kind of happens in the middle. You have your background as well. Our middle ground is going to be kind of our landscape in the distance. And you're either going to choose to do mountains or like rolling hills kind of thing. I've had it asked in the past if they could do like a city line, like a cityscape. You could, but your cityscape, you have to remember this is way far back in the distance. So if you were to draw a cityscape, it would be a very tiny line because your buildings would be much smaller because they're so far away. Mountains and hills can be very tall. So that kind of works for us to have it in our middle ground. Okay, so I'm gonna draw my mountains here. I always like to draw mountains. You can do hills if you want. I don't know, it always reminds me of like driving across Kansas, heading to the Rocky Mountains. You know, you can see the mountains in the distance, but you're not there yet, okay? So I have my foreground of my fields and my road, and then my middle ground of my mountains, and then my background is going to be my sky, okay? The last thing that I'm gonna do here is I'm going to put in a fence. And I want to put in a fence because it can be a little bit tricky to understand a fence. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm still gonna use my vanishing point, and I'm gonna put my lines for the bottom of my, they call them rungs, but it's like the fence part, the horizontal fence. Okay, and my fence is going to be kind of close to my road, but not super, super close. So this is the bottom part of my fence, and I'm going to whisper draw this because I know that there are going to be parts of it that I'm going to erase. So I'm going to draw lightly. There's the bottom part of my fence. And then I'm going to draw the top part of my fence. And I don't want it super, super tall, so I'm going to go about there. This is the top part of my fence. Okay, so far we've used our vanishing point quite a lot. This next part, we are not going to use our vanishing point. We're going to create our fence posts. And a lot of times people like to draw the square fence posts, but I have found that if you draw like a log fence post, so it's round, it's going to be much easier, okay? So what you need to think about is the fact that as things get farther back into your landscape here, they're going to also be getting smaller, which means they're also going to be getting closer. So when I draw my fence posts, down here toward the bottom of my paper, they're gonna be spread out quite a bit. And then as they get closer to the vanishing point, they're gonna be closer together, okay? So I'm not gonna use my ruler for this part, but I am going to draw 2 vertical lines next to each other for my fence posts. So here's what's gonna look like. And since these are not going to the vanishing point because they're kind of right in front of you, they're going up and down, so they don't necessarily have to connect to my vanishing point. This is that part where I said, you know, most of your vertical lines are going to connect to your vanishing point, but not always. So there's one fence post, two fence posts, 3, 4, 6, maybe one more there, 7. Okay, so there's my fence posts. So what I'm going to do at the top of them to make them look round is I'm just going to draw this oval shape at the top. And the reason why I draw this at the top is because it is below my horizon line, which means I can see the top of it. If it was up here, I would only be drawing the bottom, but it's below my horizon line, so I'm going to be able to see the top. So that means for the bottom, since I'm not gonna be able to see the bottom, but I'm gonna see the bottom edge, I'm just gonna do this rounded line here to make it look like my fence posts are round, okay? Now, for my horizontal lines here, if you want to have them be wires, like a wire fence, then I will leave them just like this. If I wanted them to be made out of wood, I might actually go in and draw another line. I'm not gonna actually do it, but it would be something like that to make it look like it's a fence post or it's a piece of wood. I kind of like the wire look. I'm a big fan of the wire fences. So what I'm actually going to do is this. Remember how I said we're gonna whisper draw? In my fence post, I'm actually going to erase my line that goes to the vanishing point inside my fence post to make it look like it's connected to the fence post, but maybe it's connected on the back side of it, so you can't actually see it. So something like that. Okay, there's my fence. After that, I am ready to start coloring. When you are coloring, you may choose to use markers, colored pencils, crayons if you'd like to, or you may paint as well. Remember and kind of plan things out what you're going to actually have them be colored with. So for instance, like my road would probably be either black or gray. My ground over here, is it part of a field? Is it just green grass? My field lines over here, what kind of field am I actually going to do? I might choose to draw, you know, in the middle of them, maybe like some green here in the middle to kind of show, you know, the different plants. I could do that. I'm actually gonna have mine be fields of flowers. So I'm gonna actually make each row a different color to kind of make it look like it's a row of different types of flowers. So that'll be fun. And then my mountains and my sky. So let's add some color.